and find out where they're going to get fingerprinted, or how they're going to get visit their loved one who's in jail, or who they can talk to regarding the coroner's case. We get more calls. I'm going to guess we get more calls by many-fold than any other county department we have. And so we don't have anybody. I can't even find the analyst to do the work that, thank you very much, Meredith has offered to do. We just don't have that staffing.
Okay, and this is looking out beyond this fiscal year. You have a sheriff budget appropriations of $12,673,000 and a jail appropriations of $10,449,000. Now, if we took that figure and added in this $1,100,000 that you're overrunning in this fiscal year, will that be the number that you'll be coming in for your budget request in 9-10?
I'd like to study that further, but I think that there's some grants that you haven't included in there that...
well, yeah, we accepting those.
Well,
yeah.
it works out to about $26 million total, Mr. Chair. It works out to $71,000 a day is what it works out to be.
So what you're thinking this high number will be a real number for the 9-10?
The high number of the 1.1 over?
We're going to be talking about the 9-10 budget discussions here within 2 months.
Well, honestly, Mr. Chair, you guys are the supervisor. I'm just a sheriff. I think we should start talking about 9-10 next week.
If we are right now.
If Supervisor Smith's points are to be taken, and I appreciate the points that you gave, if we are going to have the paradigm shift, then let's talk about them right now. Let's have some criminal justice meetings of the Criminal Justice Committee, and let's talk about how we're really going to change the public safety aspect of this county. Because I can't commit that we're going to be to the dollar of what you see in front of you. I don't know about what the contract negotiations are going to bring. I don't know if there's going to be any MTOs. I'm not sure. I just know that the cost that you're looking at in front of you is what it is to run a sheriff's office for Mendocino County, and we're trying to reduce overtime. When I say that, we're running right now 40% per month overtime compared to what we were running last year of overtime. So you haven't seen any reduction of service, and we're trying to really and truly sharpen our pencil and give you as much service as we possibly can, but it's still within limits.
Any other questions of the board? We don't want to wear you out, Sheriff. You've been
That's
up there
okay.
too
I'm
long.
just getting warmed up, Mr. Chair.
You might get called out at midnight, so we want you rested up.
Again, okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think that, a couple things are clear here. The county does make a tremendous contribution to the sheriff. It is easily beyond a $20 million general fund contribution, and so we're talking about an additional perhaps $1 million beyond that net county cost, which stacked up against the 20+ million, to me it brings it a little bit in perspective. It's on a percentage basis, yes, it's more than was budgeted, but I also go back to last August, and I was here in the audience, and there was a disagreement at that time that has never been resolved of what does it cost to fund the sheriff's office at a particular level. And there was a gap between the budget numbers that were being used by the executive office and the budget numbers that were being used by the sheriff. And again, that, to me, that issue never got resolved. So there was almost a structural deficit built in that sense, going back to August. The sheriff at that time was actually projecting that it would cost $2 million or more beyond the appropriated amount. And I think it's to the sheriff's credit that through diligently restructuring the overtime and also getting creative with the transportation, working with other agencies, this is, if I understand correctly, instead of every time we need to transport someone to prison, we try to see, well, is the bus running up and down the highway from Pelican Bay? And so we're trying to economize every way we reasonably can. And I think you've been pretty successful in some of those efforts where the budget would be further out of whack than it is. And I think at some point it does come down to the public expectations on what level of law enforcement does the public expect. And I go back to the beginning of government was to provide for public safety. And I think to me, there's a very significant value in providing adequately for public safety. And if we start to go backwards in that area, it may not immediately be a dollar cost that we see in our budget, but I think it's a real society cost to society, to the public, to people's sense of safety and security, and I think that should be given some value as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Colfax?
I feel some obligation here to raise an issue here that I'm tired of, you're tired of. 48% of the people in this county feel or felt last June, or 48% of the voters who turned out to vote, felt that marijuana cultivation, 25 plants or fewer, was permissible under the law or the decision that had been in place, however it got in place. Question I would ask you, because I hear it on a pretty regular basis from the calls I get in the 5th District, saying the sheriff is spending too much time dealing with the mom and pop operations now that Measure B has passed. Has there been an appreciable, and the question is here, because I'm not trying to tell you what you should do or what shouldn't do, but I do have the question here, has there been an increase, as was alleged, in your work effort for which you are not reimbursed, and I'm hearing this now, you're not being reimbursed for doing a lot of the work having to do with marijuana cultivation, certification, ad hoc, whatever it might be. But the question I have is how much of your work load has increased? Because it's interesting to me that 5 years ago we were up here talking about recruitment and retention and recruitment. Can we find the people? You've done a marvelous job of solving that.
Thank you.
You got the people out there. Now we got the people out there, we just don't have the money to pay them. And so the question I have here is, I'm not interested in a paradigm shift that tells you that we have a better concept up here, the 5 of us, on how to run a sheriff's office, because we don't. And we could bring in 5 more experts and they probably wouldn't have a better idea than you have, because you do it every day. But the reality here in this situation is, in Mendocino County, how much of your budget is spent, and again, ballpark figures, rough figures, that you're spending going after not the big growers, not the ones that bring in the crime. Now, we can argue what that really means. But a year ago, you had one set of problems. Has it changed appreciably that it has, in fact, taken up more of your staff time, your deputies' time, and so forth? And to what extent would it change if this Board of Supervisors would say, let's not worry, and I'm not advocating for this, be real clear about this. If this board were to say, let's not worry about X number of plants. Sheriff, don't waste your time. You and I talked about that 2-3 years ago. 50 plants or 25 plants. We said we can't go to 50. 20, it's not worth your time for 100. It's not worth your time for under 100. But you're doing that apparently, because I hear about people calling and complaining they got busted for 20 plants. That's what we have in place.
Supervisor, I would ask you to tell me what I am doing wrong and what I'm not doing wrong. You said you don't want to tell me, and I have absolutely no problem of you telling me that, to start with. And the second, I'd follow up by saying, I believe you're hearing a lot of urban legends, because our focus has been very, very clear. Our focus has been large growers. And as the article in the paper 2 weeks ago stated, this year the Sheriff's Office on marijuana has a twofold focus. Number one, we're going after the first-time growers who have moved to Mendocino County because they believe that growing anything is legal and that you can do whatever you want. And those are the people who don't have the ownership of Mendocino County that most citizens have. They don't have the pride, and they don't care what kind of pesticides, or they don't care what the environmental damage is. They don't care about the wildlife. And the second group of growers that we're going after are the big commercial growers, and that's who we went after last year. And so when your constituents call you, I would ask you to tell them to call me and challenge me, because I'm here to tell you we're going after the larger growers.